Rare and endangered Ojibwe spirit horses ran wild in the Great Lakes area, and these little horses are rewriting history books. In the 60s, they were eradicating the ponies off the Walpole Island territory, and the Walpole Island Indian ponies were being taken off the island, moved to a slaughterhouse for dog food and glue. They were all eradicated from the island, and in the 60s and early 70s, the last of the ponies that ran wild on Walpole Island were gone. The story of these 4 surviving ponies were on Lac La Croix Island, and Rhonda tells the story of how an Anishinaabe man came over and saw the last 4 horses and went home and told his father, Fred Isham. And Fred Isham and his friend Wally, Saletta, and 4 men altogether loaded up their trailer and drove across the ice. And the ponies were deemed to be destroyed because they were dirtying the waters, according to the Canadian government. So they did what they called a heist across the ice, and they traveled across the frozen lake. A few years later, it was time for Fred and Wally and all those that had horses to retire. And that's when Rare Breeds Canada contacted Rhonda Snow to see if she would be interested in having the Ojibwe spirit horses come back, or the Lac La Croix ponies come back to Northern Ontario. So she went to Minnesota and rescued those ponies and brought them back to Canada, where they had left so many years before. Our goals for the future for these little horses: we have short-term goal, and that is to make awareness of these little horses. And so our job through all different kinds of media is to make people aware that yes, they were here before colonization. They've always been here. We've been to a lot of different public events with them. We've done schools and educational programs with them. Our midterm goal is to educate and create opportunities for other people to become involved in the breeding program with the help of the Ojibwe Horse Society. Keep this herd growing and their numbers growing. And our long-term goal is to get enough people through the apprenticeship program that one day they could even go back to their Indigenous roots and go back to an Indigenous keeper.
Howdy, my name's Terry Jenkins. I'm here at TJ Stables in Chatham, Kent, and it's the new home of the Ojibwe Spirit Horses.
Who's you? My name is Rhonda Snow, but my real name is Mino Giziwak, and I'm from Northwestern Ontario.
We're here today to tell, we're very honored to be able to tell the story of the rare and endangered Ojibwe Spirit Horses. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the land that TJ Stables sits on, the traditional homelands of the people of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, the Potawatomi, and the Odawa. It's also the site of trade, travel, and gathering and healing for more than a dozen other Native tribes, and it's still home to over 100,000 tribal members. And we acknowledge the fact that the spirit horses are back on their ancestral grounds. So I want to tell you a little story. When I was a child, they were eliminating the horses from Walpole Island. It's unceded territory here in our area. And they were eliminating the ponies from there due to agricultural needs. And they were taking them to slaughter at the local kill plant here in Chatham, Kent. And my father brought some home. And I fell in love and became enamored with these wild little ponies that once ran wild on Walpole Island. They were known as the Walpole Island Indian ponies at that time. So as a little girl, I thought one day I'm going to see these ponies in the wild. But of course, there were no more. When I started my riding stable here in Chatham, Kent, I decided that wouldn't it be awesome if I could search them down and that they're descendants from the Walpole Island ponies and bring them back here to TJ Stables and incorporate them into our horse business here at TJ Stables. However, I came against dead ends. So for over 30 years, I searched for these little horses. And then I met Rhonda Snow. And Rhonda Snow lived in Fort Francis, Ontario. And I found out that she had a small herd of the pre-descendants of the Walpole Islands Indian ponies. So I made the trek there, and I'm going to introduce you to Rhonda Snow, who is also a woodland Indigenous artist. And she told her stories through the art that she has created. And she has worked diligently for years and years, over 20 years, to make sure that these ponies propagated and started to increase their numbers. Because in 1977, there were only 4 left in the world. So I'm going to just turn it over to Rhonda. Okay, here we go.
Okay. Who's you again? My name is Mino Gizibak Quebec, and I'm from the Loon Clan. My father is from White Earth. He's status from White Earth, Minnesota, and a lot of my relatives live there. They live and they make maple syrup and wild rice and birch bark canoes. My mother was Métis, and when I was a young girl, I was very shy. I was very shy because I was teased because we had Anishinaabe blood in us, and we weren't called those names. It was more like Jigaboo, and I would hide a lot, and I would hide behind a staircase. And I listened to the loggers talk about long ago how these little ponies used to live all over the islands and in the woods, and they would talk about the stories of these little tiny horses. And I knew someday I was going to look for them. I wasn't sure if I was going to find them, but I knew I was going to look for them. And one day, after I got big horses, I still had them in my mind. I used to paint white horses and lewds. So I decided that I was going to go and ask the Ministry of Natural Resources whether or not they ever saw them, because they fly up in the sky. And that's what loons do too. And they were looking for moose. And I said, do you ever see those little ponies that were lost in the woods and forgotten? And they said, no, there's none left. But Rare Breeds Canada found a few that were left over, the last remaining ones, and they need help. So I organized with Rare Breeds Canada rescue, and I got 3 stallions. Then all of a sudden the phone rang and they wanted more for homes. And then the phone rang and there was a rescue in the storm because they were going to be shot and the wolves were slaughtering them. So it was a very big thing. And when I asked questions about them, everyone told me. Even the people around the area in the books in Rare Breed Canada thought that they were just Mustangs. And so I listened to some of the stories, and the elders said that they had them, and they always had them. And I had heard that from the loggers. And in the woods, a small herd was left on the island of Lac La Croix. And a hunter shot one stallion, a young one, because he thought he was a moose, and the oldest stallion died of old age. And then there was only 4 mares left in northwestern Ontario. And I was amazed by that story. And I kept this in my bundle in my heart for many years. And I had rabbit hides, and I started to paint these paintings on rabbit hides. And I transferred them onto canvas later on. But I had a letter sent to me. And this man, Francis Isom, says and explains in this letter this story. And he was hurt that morning by his quarter horse in Minnesota, where the horses were brought to, and he injured his chin. It was hit by the bit on his horse's mouth, and he had to have stitches. But after he got out of the hospital, he was asked by the missionaries to come and help them fly over to the island of Lac La Croix and preach the word of God. But when he got there, the children noticed he was like them, and they liked that. But he couldn't attend. He had a headache. So he went for a walk down the riverbank and put his hands on his head. And he put his head down, and he prayed. And all of a sudden he felt something was watching him, and he stood up and he looked, and across the other side of the riverbank stood 4 bay mares, he said. And in the letter, he said they were the most beautiful red bay mares I've ever seen, and they had a white aurora around them. And I felt they could look into and were looking into my soul. All of a sudden, they ran and disappeared, and I ran over. I couldn't find them. So I went home on the plane that night, and I talked to my father. And I did talk to Wally Olson also, was a part of the rescue. Fred Isham, Wally Olson, Walter Saletta, and Omer Hyde took a trailer across the ice, and they loaded up the 4 beautiful little tiny bay mares. Lillian and Bishki were the small ones. Dark face or diamond, they don't know which one was what, but they heisted them over the ice, a bumpy ride in the horse trailer. The trailer did tip over, and unfortunately one mare did pass away, but they went by the light of the moon. And when they reached their destiny, which was Nat Lake area, they found a little tiny horse. Oh no, it hit the papers and the newspapers, and the Spanish registers came very excited. Within 5 to 15 minutes, they said, no, they're not Spanish. But Fred thought, well, maybe there's kind of African barbs. The history books weren't explaining it. So they had a little tiny Mustang named Smokey, and they bred the remaining mares. The bigger ones stayed at the logging camp, but Fred took Lillian and Bishki and his family, the Isham family, kept them within themselves, rebreeding, and they remained small. And they were small. And in the Indian Affairs archives, they said they were too small, they were worthless and useless, shaggy ponies, and they needed to be destroyed. They had no value. And they forced the native people to start ranching and having cattle. And they were a nuisance. They were eating all the crops and destroying the plants to colonize. But Fred kept his plants, and he inbred them. And that was the herd that I went over to get and brought them back. And they were wild. And the barn was quite damaged. It's like putting a bunch of moose in your barn, because Fred's herd had been left to wander in the woods for a long time. So besides the ice, the snowstorms and all, the barn was quite damaged. And I did tell people, for some odd reason, I could hear crying in the woods. And that happened a lot. It was like I heard children crying. And then I was told the story of how the children would cry under the schoolhouses. And one child remembers hiding under there. And he said the ponies would come and they would hear them crying, and they would sniff and paw on the earth, and it would comfort them. So those are such strong stories that made me cry. And I finally put them down on canvas, and it was a collection of stories from many, many years of sharing, and loggers and Métis people of the woods. And it really is my area. It's not woods, it's bush. And that's what it is. And this Métis man came, and he said, looked over at the first 3 stallions, and he said, yeah, those are them. Those were the ones my dad had. I remember, he said, we used them to haul fish off the ice. And in the mornings when the holes were frozen over, he said they would go out there and paw, and we'd throw them frozen fish, and that's what they would eat. And they were little. And this is the Blue Jays, the Whiskey Jacks, and the spirits of the Métis man and the fish that are painted in this painting. And I was really honored to have been gifted the story. And this is a gift back for everyone to enjoy these stories, because these little native ponies were the original ponies, like the original people. And they ate natural medicines, and they had a good life, and it wasn't about money. And when there wasn't any roads long ago, a little girl had one, and she took her little pony through the woods because there wasn't any roads, so there was a trail, but she went to meet her relatives. And one day when she was about to head home, a great big blizzard started to happen. So she jumped on her pony to get home, but it was too late. It got very cold with the winds, and she stuck her fingers, because they were frozen under the mane of the horse, and let go of the reins. And often these little ponies didn't need reins. And you can see on the travars, sometimes the mothers would be sitting on them, and they had no reins. And she all of a sudden realized her fingers were warming. And she had hope, and the little pony started to trot and was warming her body. And she was so surprised and grateful of her little pony, and she felt it was taking care of her. All of a sudden, the pony stopped, and there she was. She was at home. So they are caregivers for the people. And a lot of times we think we're caregivers for them, but they don't need us. We need them, and they can take care of themselves. They just need us to let them live what they used to live long ago naturally without being dominated. So these ponies were not dominated by the original people. The original people didn't have whip spurs. They asked, and they lived with them like family. They lifted the horses above themselves, and they held on to the little ponies as long as they could until the agents held back the checks. And they forced them to leave their culture. And these ponies were worth so much to them. And they all lived in harmony. They didn't bully their ponies. And the smaller ones were the most worthy ones, because they didn't need to gather those swamp grasses for the winter as much for them. It just made sense. They can cross beaver dams. Their hides are really thick and their ears are really furry. They're made for this, for Canada and all over the States. The Army sergeants say their speed and endurance couldn't have matched any other horses. The Pony Express used them. It's not in the history books. And I'm not crazy, because I was told I was. And the people that the people that wrote the history books left this out. This land was full of buffalo and animals, and the people had a good life with them. So it's exciting to know that they're back.
It's exciting to share. Thank you, Rhonda, for
You're
sharing
welcome.
all these beautiful paintings that you that's just a tip of the iceberg. And if you want to see more of the paintings, just go to spirithorses.ca, and you'll be able to see some of those paintings and their stories as well. But there were thousands that ran wild around and all across Canada, and particularly the boreal forest near the Great Lakes. Rhonda found that it was getting too much for her to handle the ponies and increase the numbers, and financially it became very stressful, and she put a call out for people to take over. Now, Rhonda,
I had been calling out for at least 20 years about these ponies, and they were not popular. And just lately, people seem to believe that the history books aren't always accurate.
so they're rewriting the history books. So the ponies, like I say, I had been searching and searching for these ponies. And finally, when I saw the call out for these little Ojibwe spirit horses and heard their history and found out that the Potawatomi people had driven the ponies and ridden the ponies back to the Walpole Island area, that's when I knew in my heart that these were the ponies that came from Walpole Island. And now we've done some DNA testing and so on, and they match. So I have found my long lost ponies to come back at my desire. So what we've done with the ponies here, Rhonda was using them in her healing at her ranch in Fort Francis.
Learning in a different way, on a native way of non-dominance.
And so we're using them the same way here, but we're also using them for therapeutic riding. They're excellent temperaments. These ponies have such a wonderful temperament. And just to give you an example of how the creator really wanted this union to happen between Rhonda and myself and the ponies, we're all in partnership. I drove to Fort Francis to pick up the ponies, and I was spying. I ended up coming home with 16 of her herd. And so that was a 2-day drive for me. And when I got there, I said, I'm a little nervous doing this drive here and coming on to Rhonda. We had only spoken on the phone. And the woman that was with me said, what makes you so nervous? And I said, well, it's kind of like online dating. Like we've talked and talked on the phone, but we've never really met in person. And I'm taking her life's work. So I was very afraid that maybe she would be bitter, or maybe she would be sad, or I didn't know what kind of emotions we were going to have to deal with. But when we met, she said, "You really get it. You know what I was trying to do." She hugged me and said, this is a relief to know that they're going where her dream was going to be continued. My dream was going to begin and pick up where hers left off. So that was an awesome collaboration that we made at that time. She said, "You want to see your little ponies?" I said, "Yeah, let's go see them." And really had to go to the bathroom, but meanwhile they were out running in this 160-acre field, and they came over and they started to circle us, and one mare kept brushing against me, and then she'd go and lay down, and then she'd come back and brush against me. But in Northern Ontario, the bugs are the size of little mini helicopters, and I thought that was what she was trying to do. But I looked, and Rhonda looked, and I said, "I think we're going to have a baby." And certainly this mare waited until the old keeper and the new keeper could come together to deliver her foal. So we are considered keepers. We're not considered owners, even though we've bought and paid for them, so to speak. But we don't feel that they belong to us. They belong to everyone. They belong to the people. They belong to
They belong back into the land.
And they belong to the land. Yes. Thank you, Rhonda. And so therefore, it's really, really important to continue that. And so my goal is, I have many goals for these little horses. My number one goal was awareness, and let people know about them, because so many people don't even know they exist. So I decided that we would start to campaign them and let people know about them, and contact media and let people know that they actually do exist and tell their story. So that's one of the goals for these ponies. The other goal is to get them back to their people. And besides the breeding program or the producing program that we have, we want to get them back to their people and get them back where they belong, and let them use them for the healing of the trauma and the generational trauma. So we're looking for apprentices that would come here and learn how to do all those things that we've started, and to carry on and hopefully get them back in their communities and take them back to the communities with them. So that's one of our goals. But it's an amazing story how intuitive these ponies is. What makes these ponies special? That's one of the things that we often hear. And what makes them special is, first of all, the creator told the ponies when he created them to bond with the heartbeat of Mother Earth. So when the ponies heard the drumming, which is the heartbeat for the people, the ponies bonded with the people, and the creator was pleased. And so these little horses, you just have to think what you want them to do, and they do it. And to train one and I wouldn't even call it breaking, to get one to do the whatever you bid them to do and need their help for, that's when you just have to think it, and they just work with you. They work with the people. And so when it came time to load 16 wild ponies that had never had a rope on them, never had a halter on them, they weren't halter broke, they weren't anything. They had to load onto a trailer that looks like a giant tin cave that makes lots of noise. We had a thought that how we were going to do it. And Andrea, who is our Indigenous liaison here at TJ Stables, was with me, and she started out that morning, and she picked cedar, and she placed cedar in the trailer, And then she drummed and sang the Creator song, and she walked the path that the ponies would walk. And she sang the Creator song at the same time drumming. And she smudged the trailer, and we felt we were ready to load them. And then, do you want to tell about the shakers?
Well, when I had first gotten the ponies, I got them and I wanted them to teach me. And I just drummed and they came to me. So Andrea started to drum, and then when she stopped drumming, I just used oats in a bucket, but they never seen oats before. So I just shook it like the shakers that we do. And the shakers were a rhythm, and they understand rhythm. So every footstep was exactly in the shaking rhythm. And it was a beat, and everyone came one by one by one by one, right behind the other. And they went in a circle, and they could have got off when they went in the circle, and they stayed on, and they continued to circle with the shaking sound.
Right inside the trailer. They could have easily stepped off that trailer. If you've ever tried to load a Western or a domesticated horse, they step one foot on and fly back, and they don't want to get on. But these little horses, one after another, 16 of them, stepped on the trailer, and we closed the door, and they settled in, and we made the long journey back to Chatham, Kent. When we got here, the Indigenous people were gathered around the fence waiting for their return, and left tobacco for them. And we just had such an amazing experience bringing them back home. What makes these ponies different not only is their personal connection with people, they also have a connection with the spiritual connection. And you want to talk about the medicines?
Well, mainly these little ponies are valuable, just like moose and deer, and they survive the ice age just like the wolves. And they can show us how to live off the land also. They can live off the land. Not very many horses are known to do that, only the original horses. So we can learn from these horses and let them be wild. And they deserve to go back to their lands, and just like people did. And they can help. They can show us exactly what is safe to eat, and their medicine. What they eat is medicine.
So they have a spiritual connection with Turtle Island, Mother Earth, and all the creatures, and sky and the land and but they also, to protect them, they have amazing hair in their ears. They have the furriest ears I've ever seen, but that keeps the bugs out. They came from northern, like the north. When they're in the north, it keeps their ears tips from freezing. And they're very, very, very thick hair in their ears. They also have a dorsal stripe. So a dorsal stripe is a line down their back. It's a dark line. So even if they're born black, you can still see the line in their young days of that it is there. And it runs from the tip of their head, right, their forehead, right down their mane and down their back and right to the tip of their tail. And so there's many that have the dorsal stripe. Also, they have, it's rumored that they have a unique nostril that they can filter out the cold air. So that makes them more adaptable in the cold weather. These little horses are so strong, and that's part of the reason that they were eliminated, was because they were able to, the stamina of these little ponies was much more than the horses that came from Europe. And they kind of were able to be the mobility of the people, their mobile food if they needed it. And so to contain the people on the reserves. And of course, they were their cultural and spiritual connection. So to get more control of the people, the ponies had to go. So that's why all of them were eradicated. And in 1977, like I said, there's only 4 left in the world. So thank goodness for the conservation efforts of Fred Isham, Wally Saletta, and the other Rare Breeds Canada, Rhonda
and the ponies
Snow.
themselves for
Yeah.
being so resilient.
The ponies show that they're a good example, and we take them to the schools. We take them to different storytelling events so people can see that even though they were down in numbers, almost extinct, almost like the Indigenous people their numbers were dwindled, they have come back, and they're coming back, and they're showing the resilience, and they're showing the recovery of their kind, and they're growing in numbers, and they're able to connect people with the culture, and they're able to also be a teaching tool for other non-Indigenous people to reach out, see the horses, hear their stories, and become allies of the cultural movement that's going on right now.
Yes, and the ministers and the religious officials who didn't want children to see them breeding, so they deemed them to be destroyed. I painted a painting about that. And they got in a way of resource extraction, and they needed animal extinction to get the fuels out of the earth to colonize. And the crown land needs to go back to the people. And these little horses need their own bands, and they need their own families, just like they did long ago. And they deserve to be there with the people on the crown lands.
So we have to get their numbers up to where they need to be before they can ever become wildlife again. We have to increase their numbers enough that they can sustain the hardships of being in nature. But so here at TJ Stables, what we've started to offer now is we have a spirit horse encounter where you can come to TJ Stables. You can see the horses, you can mingle with them, you can feel their cultural connection, you can feel their spiritual connection, and you hear about the journey that they've been on between Rhonda and myself. We have a Métis encampment that has a Métis resident that tells his story about a buffalo hunt that he is waiting to do with there were 1,000 Red River carts that were coming, and each Red River cart had up to 8 assistants with ponies. So there was 8,000 ponies coming for this one buffalo hunt near the end of the
Sounds like a lot.
series. That was a lot of ponies.
And there was 15 to 25,000 in the States during one war, all marching in perfect order. They were all over Turtle Island.
So these little horses have been significant in the history, but they haven't been recognized at all. Those have been left out of the history books. So here at TJ Stables, you get an opportunity to actually come, and we have the teepees. You can stay overnight too, so we can, hear it and really get a full experience that would be really blow you away when you hear all of the wonderful stories and you see these ponies and how they interact with people.
Mm-hmm. And I'll continue painting the paintings until they are returned back to the land. And there was a little pony by where I live on an island, and that's where I paint on a houseboat. And there was a little pony there, and he lived for 40 years. They are strong. He lived by himself, fought off the wolves, backed himself into a corner, and stole hunters' ducks and ate moose and deer and fish. So they're very resilient. They can teach us so much, but if we contain them, we don't get taught a thing we take. So we can learn from them, and they're ready.
So I'm gonna, hopefully the internet will hold us, and we'll go see if we can get close enough to the corral where we brought some up for you to have a look at. And so we're just gonna try it, and if it doesn't work, then we'll have to. Okay. So these little horses, this is the latest foal that was born. And this is, there's been 9 foals born here at TJ Stables since we brought them here. And this is our brood, this was what we call the maternity ward. This is all the brood mares. And we have several other mares that they're just, they'll be mated this year. So we'll have a new batch of babies for next year as well. So there's 3 babies here right now. There's 2 more to come. And I think this little one's name is Gray Cloud. This little one's name is 3 Sisters. And we always ask the elders to name them. The little black one at the far end, her name is Flower. Her mother's name is, how do you say it in Ojibwe?
Shagog?
Shagog. It means skunk in Ojibwe. And so Shagog had a little baby named Flower. Oh, here she comes. You'll see how they have this woolly hair. And it's much like a buffalo born, this one was born on, I hope. So I'm sure that if you've never heard of the Ojibwe spirit horse before, okay, if you spirit horses before, can you hear me now? If you've never heard the Ojibwe spirit horses before, I sure hope that what we've been able to show you today has given you some insight as to how valuable they are to the Indigenous culture, that they do exist. So many thought they were worthless, and there's just a bunch of ponies, but there's more than that.
The native ponies will be featured in the Winnipeg Symphony, and they're composing the music to the art and the stories. So it's starting to catch on from me hiding the paintings under my bed and being afraid to discuss it because of all the people, the knowledgeable horse bloodline people arguing it, to now they're out there. And they are native ponies that originally were always here. So I'm really, really proud that people are understanding and honoring them also.
So I want to thank you today for all your help to help us expand the word on these ponies. All of you, and especially this programming today, has allowed us to give more awareness out there amongst the public and the Indigenous people, to tell them that these ponies exist. And that's the only way they're going to survive. So with your kindness of watching today and your kindness of featuring these little horses today, you have played a big part in their survival. And it seems like a small part on your end, but it's a big part for these ponies, because the more people that know about them, the more people that talk about them, the more people that share some of the stories that Rhonda has shared, that was shared to her by the elders, the better opportunities for these ponies to exist. At one time you couldn't even hardly give away the foals. They were born and they couldn't give them away.
No, I
hardly.
I couldn't. I tried.
And no one wanted them because they didn't understand their significance.
And hardly anyone wanted to breed them. So, and I had them and I let them run. Many times people would, or I had situations where electric fencing was taken and they would run and the neighbors would not be happy because they were into their gardens and crops. The police would come. They had BBs in their hides. They had just as much right to run the lands as the wildlife. The judge and court system would not listen. I did everything I could to try to explain, but just like they were deemed worthless, useless, I was deemed crazy. And these little ponies, they'd go 20 miles a day and they come back home again. I have videos of that. If you want to see them someday, I can put them out there, and they're coming home and they're letting me know. Sometimes there's a wolf over there. They'll let me know. They're our caregivers.
So by bringing all this awareness to the little horses, it's going to help with their survival. And right now there's 80 mature breeding eligible ponies out there, and about 200 ponies altogether of these rare and endangered. We want to get them off the endangered list, but it has to be over 200 breeding eligible horses to make it off that list. So we're a far cry from getting where we want to be, but we're working hard on it.
And they don't need to be broke. I just treated them better than I treat myself. And those little kids came, busloads of people, and rode them on the trails, and they can be that way again, free to run in their own full spirits.
So thank you all, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the programming. We want to thank all the participants of this programming throughout this whole Indigenous celebrations
And all the
acknowledgements.
artists on the TJ Stable, and what you do is on your webpage.
Yeah,
right?
visit spirithorses.ca and you'll see a lot of our art. You'll hear about our teepee encounter and our spirit horse encounter. So thank you so much, Miigwech.
Miigwech, and happy Indigenous Days to all animals, all people, all living things.